Hey everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, and yes, I will be your April Fool here on April the 1st, 2022, episode 33. We can make jokes. I'm not a big fan of April Fools. It's been lame. I guess it's fun. It was fun when I was younger, when I was a kid, but the whole April Fool's thing is kind of worn out its welcome. And I don't want to make jokes this week because a couple hours after we taped episode 32 last week, we got the news that the Foo Fighters' fantastic drummer, Taylor Hawkins, had passed away down in Bogota, Colombia. I'm not here to judge anybody. I am not here to lay blame. It's a shame. If it was a drug overdose, which it looks like it was, the officials down in South America say he had 10 different substances / drugs in his system at the time of death, an enlarged heart, which is never a good sign. I just don't understand how, with 3 kids and a wife, 50 years old, you do this to yourself. I just don't get it. And I know we've asked this question, these kinds of questions over and over, time and time again, with all these different actors, celebrities, rock stars. And I'm not the biggest fan of Hollywood, and I am not the biggest fan of the celebrity lifestyle. So that's where the question comes in, is why do they do this? Why is this? There is this inherent need to feel better. The roaring crowds, the adulation, the awards, the statuettes just don't seem to be enough. I mean, Taylor Hawkins was on top of the world. Yeah, sure, you can tell me. We don't know, and I'm not speculating. Something in his personal life might have been going south, might have been going the wrong way, but the man was the drummer for the most popular group in the world. And next to Dave Grohl, he was the Foo Fighters. Everybody knew it. So I sit here and wonder, like a lot of you do, why he felt the need to go overboard with the drugs. Again, married with children. Makes no sense to me. Of course, the Foo Fighters have canceled their 2022 tour. No surprise there. And just today, I don't know if they were trying to figure out a way to do some sort of a tribute to Taylor Hawkins, but they finally did announce that they will not be on the Grammys this upcoming weekend. They were, of course, scheduled to be feature performers. My personal memories of the Foo Fighters, of course, I've seen them a couple times, and of COVID, and now this have messed up my chances over the past couple of years to see them, more than just the 2 times I have been fortunate enough to partake of the greatness of the Foo Fighters. But the first time I saw them was easily one of the top 5 concerts I've ever seen in my life. I saw them at the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana. This is going on probably close to 9 or 10 years ago. The best part of it was we had really good seats. We were in the lower section at Market Square, which of course was the old Indiana Pacers basketball arena. Lower section seats about 7 or 8 rows up. But in the first section, the lowest section down, so even though the stage was on the other side of the arena, still not bad seats. I would kill for those seats nowadays. Those seats usually run for a decent band now 100, 125 easy. And a friend of mine and I got to see them, and the coolest thing was they dropped an acoustic stage down from the rafters, a small circular stage. They came out, walked through the middle of the crowd on the floor, hopped up on this stage, and did 3 or 4 songs acoustically. And they were literally 20 yards away from us, if that. And I can't use the language I would like to use because, of course, I'm trying to keep the fortress clean. But Dave Grohl basically said, you guys thought you had bad seats. And they dropped an F-bomb, as he was, and is still always inclined to do. That's rock and roll, kids. But Taylor Hawkins was, of course, along with Dave Grohl, the heart and soul of the Foo Fighters. The second time that I got to see them, another friend of ours went, actually my other friend's wife. So, of course, I was playing the third wheel, as I am so good at doing in life. And she fell in love with the opening act, the Struts. She's to this day. Now we're only going back about 5 years, but to this day, she loves the Struts. And of course, Taylor Hawkins came out at one point and sang Under Pressure with the lead singer of the Struts at what will now be, to me, the last Foo Fighters show. I know they'll probably go on in some way, shape, or form, but to me, this is going to be tough for Dave Grohl. This is going to be a tough call. I would almost, if I were him, I would start a new band. Bring in the guys from the Foo Fighters, form a new band, bring in a new drummer, and call it something else. And I know in the end it's his call, and he doesn't want to give up that brand. He doesn't want to give up all the work that he's put into that brand. But at the same time, I think he knows how important and how integral Taylor Hawkins was to the Foo Fighters. I would expect we're not going to hear anything from Dave Grohl about the Foo Fighters until next year. I think this is a type of situation where he's got to take some time, almost a year, and just regroup, refocus, rethink the whole deal. And I've talked about this in the past on the Fortress. He is so energetic. borderline manic in terms of always having to work, always trying to stay busy. And it's just so bizarre that they just put out that movie, Studio 666, and the Dream Widow EP, which we will actually review in segment 2 this week, came out on the day, basically within 6 to 8 hours of Taylor Hawkins dying. And there's people out there that are being gross, reading too much into things, saying, oh, look, Dave Grohl was in Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, look what happened to him. And now Foo Fighters, Taylor Hawkins, look what happened to him. You know, you can do the whole, one time is a coincidence. That's all it is right now. It's a coincidence. Let's not go any further with it than that. And let's not talk about Studio 666 being some kind of a cursed movie like The Crow was for Brandon Lee. Let's just sit back and think about the fact that we take a lot of things for granted. We take our lives for granted. We think we're indestructible, especially when we're younger. A rock and roll star with all the praise and the fans cheering night in and night out. Nothing can touch him. Nothing can get to him. Couple extra shots of tequila, couple extra snorts of coke. It's not going to bother me. I'm immortal. And it goes all the way down, trickles all the way down to everybody out there like you and I. We need to take care of ourselves for the people in our lives, the people that care about us, and the people that love us. And we need to make sure those people are taking care of themselves as well. So I will never criticize anybody for the way they live their life. I will feel sad. I will feel forlorn, especially when something like this with Taylor Hawkins happens. I'm no choir boy. But in the end, we have got to, as individuals and as parts of families and parts of society, look out for everyone around us, our brothers and sisters, our kids, other people's kids. Do not let something like this happen to the people in your life. And in the end, it could still happen and it won't be your fault because it's down to the individual. So guess what? Take care of yourselves as well. Moving on to other news of the world, as we always do in segment 1, the rock news of the past week. Of course, I mentioned the Foo Fighters tour has been canceled, so that opened up a slot because I'm getting a refund on that. I wish I wasn't, for multiple reasons. Selfish on some levels, altruistic on others. Here's a tour I would have loved to have seen, and it's just not coming anywhere remotely close to where I live. But for anybody from the 80s, Rick Springfield, Men at Work, and John Waite of the Babies going out on tour, triple bill. I looked, the closest place I can find is at least 4 hours away, one way. So I'm sorry, guys, not going to make it unless you expand the tour and you open up some other venues and some other places. And I'll tell you something I'm noticing, a disturbing trend. Thinking about this tour, thinking about looking at the concert dates that Springfield and Waite and Men at Work scheduled, people are staying away from Chicago. I'm noticing a lot of acts will not play Chicago. And I can't figure that out. Third biggest city in the country. Is it politics? Is it restrictions? Crime? Tell you what, I'm about an hour and 15, hour and 20 outside of Chicago. I don't like going there for concerts. It's hard to get to the venues. Toll roads, parking. Now I know in New York, same problem. But at least if you live in New York, the venues are a lot closer. But just something to keep an eye on. Speaking of Chicago, I have mentioned this multiple times on the Fortress over the last 6 months or so, and I am bitter about it. It was a computer glitch. Of course, demand was high, prices were high, but Genesis opened their final tour in Chicago at the United Center, could not get tickets for it. Now, everything's come full circle. Genesis played their final show ever, March the 26th, 2022, this past week, at the O2 Arena in London. This is one time where we know we're not going to get another farewell tour. We're not going to get The Who or Leonard Skinner saying, we're done. Oh, wait, no, we're not. This is definitely the end for Genesis. Phil Collins, his health, and I hope he still sticks around for years and years to come, but he does not look good. Of course, he had to sit for the entire show at every concert stop on the last Domino tour. I was fortunate enough to see them in Cleveland. It's been about 15 years, but that was going back to the last tour, which was supposedly, again, I don't think they ever called it a farewell tour, but we figured that might be the last shot we were getting to see them. So I did get to see them in Cleveland. Of course, made it a weekend. Checked out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Would have liked to have seen them on this final farewell tour, the last Domino tour. Cool thing about this O2 show in London, even though I think he's pretentious beyond belief, it was kind of a nice gesture for Peter Gabriel to show up at this particular concert, mend some fences, show some class, take pictures backstage with Phil Collins. So maybe Peter Gabriel isn't that much of a jerk after all. Because boy, I'll tell you, he kind of comes off like I'm better than you every time he talks. Of course, this is the guy who started off with Genesis wearing flower outfits and weird makeup, basically wanting to be a performance artist. And of course, we all know Genesis, when they started, were a prog rock, art rock type of band. And then when Collins actually took over, when they dropped down to a trio with Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks, now there for a while, the first couple albums, the old Genesis fans probably were still okay. I think after Abacab, that's when the old school Genesis fans probably said, okay, that's enough. But to me, Abacab is by far the greatest Genesis album. It walks that high wire, that tightrope between the old prog rock Genesis and what was to come with the pop rock Genesis. The Invisible Touch, I Can't Dance Genesis, which by the time they finished up was pretty much hit and miss. The goopy Phil Collins ballads, you kind of just wish he would have saved those for his solo albums. And let Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks have their say in each and every song. But of course, we see this in a lot of the bands from the 80s. The egos get bloated, especially with the lead singers. We saw it with Steve Perry and Journey. We saw it with Lou Gramm and Foreigner, David Lee Roth and Van Halen, on and on and on. Sting and the Police. And 9 times out of 10, it never works. But these guys are looking at it like, hey, I don't have to split the money 3 ways. I don't have to split the money 4 ways. Okay? How's the music? Is the music better or worse? I will argue in almost every case I just mentioned, the music is much worse. Finally, wrapping up news of the world. Mentioned last week, Aerosmith is going to have a residency in Las Vegas coming up here the second half of 2022. Another one of these COVID deals that was originally supposed to happen a year or 2 ago that's been pushed back. The war with them and their original drummer, Joey Kramer, continues, though. Although there's not really much talk of animosity here. We really don't know what's going on, but Joey Kramer will be sitting out this 2022 Las Vegas residency with Aerosmith. And Aerosmith has gone through a lot. We all know it, and a lot of people will argue they're the greatest American rock band of all time. Of course, I will always say Van Halen is that band, but I can't argue with Aerosmith. Is there going to be a farewell tour? Will there ever be a farewell tour for Aerosmith? Will they be able to keep all 5 of their classic lineup members together? Everything that's happened here over the last 5 or 6 years with Joey Kramer makes me think that it's going to be really, really hard to pull it off. I've seen Aerosmith a couple times, one time bad, one time really good. I don't think I'm gonna cry if I don't get to see a farewell tour from Aerosmith. Sorry. Especially when I figure the ticket prices are gonna be astronomical. And I know they're gonna play at least 2 or 3 of those terrible 80s MTV, early 90s MTV power ballads. the sellout songs that I cannot stand from Aerosmith. There you go, kids. There's segment one of the Fortress of Rock here on April Fool's Day 2022. We have got a lot of new music to talk about coming up in our next segment, Breakdown, including we continue with the Foo Fighters Taylor Hawkins theme to a certain extent, where we'll review Dream Widow, the EP from the fictional band, which is actually the Foo Fighters, based off of the movie Studio 666. Also, new music from The Fixx, The Black Moods, Def Leppard, and Aldo Nova coming up here in just a few minutes. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on The Fortress. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment one, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, kids, time for segment two here this week on the Fortress of Rock. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Episode 33 here, taping April the 1st, 2022. Lots of good music to talk about this week, as opposed to last week. Outside of the concert review with Mammoth, WVH, and Dirty Honey, I really did not like much when it came to the new music on last week's breakdown segment. Fortunately, this week things are a little bit better. And of course, in a bitter twist of fate and irony, I am going to review Dream Widow, which came out basically the same day that Taylor Hawkins passed away. Dream Widow, of course, is the Foo Fighters recording under a demonic moniker, a fake band that they created for their movie Studio 666. And again, not trying to be gross, not trying to be morbid, given Taylor Hawkins' death, but supposedly, I've not seen the movie yet, but supposedly the premise is that Dave Grohl and the band finds the tapes for this Dream Widow album, and if you play them and listen to them all the way through, you turn into some kind of possessed, murderous monster. So again, not trying to make light of Taylor Hawkins' death, but the timing is what it is. So here is my review of Dream Widow. 8 songs. Dave Grohl is calling it an EP. It's almost 45 minutes long, so to me it's a full-length album. Again, I grew up in the age of Van Halen, where their great classic albums lasted 30 to 35 minutes at most. 8 songs, 9 songs, maybe 10 if you threw in a couple instrumentals. So technically, it's an EP. I think I see why Dave Grohl refers it refers to it as such, is because of the 8 songs, if you look at them, basically tracks 2 through 6 are fully formed, solid, great songs. Whereas the lead-in track, Encino, and track 7 and 8 are more death metal goof-offs, probably trying to buy into this mythology that the movie set up. So, as always, we go track by track. So, of course, I mentioned Encino, the first song, the lead off, if you want to call it a song, death metal intro isn't really much to me. I'm not a big fan. You guys know I'm not a huge thrash metal, death metal type of guy. I love the Foo Fighters, though. I love Dave Grohl. So I was holding out hope that this would draw me in, and to a point it did. Because as I mentioned, once you hit song 2, Cold, then you start to hear a balance about the best balance you're going to get from songs 2 through 6. You're going to get a balance of Dave Grohl's smarts, the Foo Fighters tunefulness, along with the desire to make this dark and metallic, to push it to that death metal threshold. Cold is probably the best song on the album. You can hear an actual pop rock song trying to struggle out of the layers and layers, of course, of darkness and heavy guitar work. Then song 3, March of the Insane, of course, we've talked about that. That was the release before, the one song that was released before the album came out. And initially, I wasn't a big fan. I really wasn't a big fan of March of the Insane. In the context of this album and where it sits after Cold, it works better for me. I'm still never going to love it, but I will say I probably like it now. I'm going to hold off. Again, I hate to do this because, as you know, I like to analyze all albums track by track, but once we get done with track 6, I will bring in all the different influences that are obvious on this album. So move on to track 4, The Sweet Abyss. Pretty good, pretty solid. Again, it's hard to differentiate outside of, again, the first track and the last couple on Dream Widow. Again, Grohl's just going for that tuneful dirge metal stuff. But The Sweet Abyss works, as does the next song, Angel with Severed Wings, and then track 6, which next to Cold might be the best song on the Dream Widow EP, Come All Ye Unfaithful. So before I start to rip apart the end of the EP, going back through Cold, March of the Insane, The Sweet Abyss, Angel with Severed Wings, and Come All Ye Unfaithful, it's obvious the influences. So in a way, I think this Dream Widow project for Dave Grohl was a way to give a nod, give thanks to a lot of the bands that influenced him and the Foo Fighters, because I hear a lot of Metallica. I hear Judas Priest. I hear a lot of Stone Temple Pilots. And I hear a lot of Slash and GNR. Those are the four main influences that really come through to me in this middle section of Dream Widow, which is what makes this EP work. Because once we get past Come All Ye Unfaithful, then Becoming is just garbage. And then the 10-minute instrumental ending, Lacrimas de Ibrius. And I'm sure I butchered that, but that's fine. Butchered it. Yeah. Given the movie's themes, seems appropriate. But I bet you, my guess is Dave Grohl pushed this project. He really, again, so energetic, always trying to create, always trying to make new stuff, which I admire beyond belief, especially now when there are so few artists that do this. He had Cold, March of the Insane, The Sweet Abyss, Angel with Severed Wings, and Come All Ye Unfaithful. I've got 5 really good songs. What else can I do? I've got to get this out. I've got to tie it into the movie somehow. He ran out of time. Just didn't have quite enough in terms of content, lyrics, to really make this Dream Widow project a full-fledged 10-song album. So basically, it's half an album with a bunch of demonic, instrumental, death metal stuff thrown in to fill it out. Final word on it. Check it out on Spotify. I would skip, again, the opening track and the end. I would just listen to 2 through 6. Maybe make yourself a Dream Widow playlist with just those 5 songs on them. Maybe throw in your favorite Foo Fighters songs. Give yourself something cool to listen to driving to and from work. But overall, Dream Widow as a whole, I can't say is a success. Again, it feels like something that Dave Grohl wanted to make into something more full-fledged. And the time ran out or something happened where he did not have enough energy. With him, I can't believe that, but something happened where he could not finish this project. All right, moving on to singles. Of course, we've talked about the return of Def Leppard. Kick will be the leadoff single from Diamond Star Halos, their full-length album coming out here in a couple months. And of course, Def Leppard, like all great bands from the 80s, has the moments where you listen to them and you go, this is why this band sold tens of millions of records. You can say it about Motley Crue, you can say it about Poison, you can say it about Rat. And they had their moments where they actually put together full albums of moments like that. Out of the Cellar, Pyromania, Shout at the Devil. But then, of course, when they couldn't sustain the momentum, we were just talking about that with Dream Widow. I still think that's what happened with that EP, is that Dave Grohl could not sustain the momentum to make it a full, solid album. We've seen that happen with all of the bands I mentioned beforehand. And now we go back to Def Leppard. Has Def Leppard really put out a full solid album since the late 80s? I would say no. And I'm a huge Def Leppard fan. There have been bits and pieces here and there. Of course, they committed the cardinal sin in my eyes where they did a covers album. I am just not a fan of covers albums. Just not. I kind of like it when, if you remember Encomium, way back in the day, tribute to Led Zeppelin. I like those type of albums more where you have different bands, different singers, different performers doing one song each to create a covers album. That's a little bit more acceptable to me. But when one band does an entire covers album, that just screams to me the creative well has run dry. Where does that leave me with Kick? Kick sounds like Def Leppard trying to write a hit single. Is it bad? No. But is it up to the level of anything on Pyromania or anything on High and Dry? No, not even remotely close. Now, if you want to compare it to what they've done over the last 30 years, then I can make an argument that Kick's pretty good. But for those of us who cherish old Def Leppard from the 80s, Kick is a little stale, a little derivative. I'll take it, but I expect more and better from the second, the third, the fourth releases from Diamond Star Halos, because if this is the best they've got, and I'm going to see them, yes, I am going to see the quadruple bill with them and the Crew and Poison and Joan Jett. I'm just really worried this whole thing is going to turn into some kind of creaky nostalgia fest that I am not going to be really comfortable or happy with. Let's stick with the 80s. Let's stick with a couple other acts from the 80s, but I'm going to say a little bit more positive viewpoint than with Def Leppard. The Fixx. This is the third single off their upcoming album, Every 5 Seconds. Latest release is called Closer. And I really like this song. I've always said that music trumps lyrics to a point. If you can make a song catchy and the band is tight and you've got a great guitar riff, a great hook, you could probably sing about puppies and watermelons and I'd be okay with it. But if you can find a song that does that, but instead of puppies and watermelons, you actually get relevant, solid, interesting, intelligent lyrics, then we're talking. And that's how I feel about Closer. Because the Fixx and Closer are setting up a nice dichotomy where they're talking about social media and all of the technology that has come across since they were big in the 80s. Remember, they didn't have Spotify. There were no MP3s or iPods. It was all MTV and albums and cassettes and CDs. It was all physical for the most part. And now you've got the internet. So they're trying to work it on two fronts where they're saying, is all this stuff bringing us closer together as a society? Are we closer together as people? And then the other part of it, are we bringing ourselves closer to Armageddon? It's almost prescient in terms of now looking at what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. Very smart song. Very smart song. Musically, it's solid. So I definitely recommend check out the third single off the Fixx's upcoming album. One of those bands, and at some point in time we'll get into lesser known bands, personal favorites that didn't sell a lot, didn't get a lot of airplay. We all should have them. We all should know who our personal favorite guilty pleasure bands are. Because that's what, to me, makes music so special, is when we find a band that only maybe one or two of our friends know about, nobody else. They don't break it big. They don't break it nationally. They stay regional. But they do just enough where they can keep recording and make a living and put on great concerts. That's how I feel about the Black Moods. I saw the Black Moods open for another guilty pleasure band of mine, Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers, up in Kalamazoo, Michigan at Bell's. Of course, anybody who lives up in the upper Midwest knows Bell's Brewery. They've got a little restaurant / club in Kalamazoo. So I was fortunate enough to be able to see the Black Moods open for Roger Clyne. And it's the only time I've seen them, but they are fantastic. They have got that energy. They have got that rock and roll vibe that I love. They're a nice combination of the 80s and the 90s, a little bit of grunge, a little bit of the pop metal. New song, Saturday Night, second release off their upcoming album, coming out here in summer of 2022. Saturday Night is pretty much a straight-on party song, straight-on rocker. I like the fact that these guys are tight musically. They're not singing about anything earth-shattering like I mentioned in the last review with The Fixx. They're not trying to solve the world's problems, but at the same time, Saturday Night's even, I don't want to say mindless, but even more, give me a shot of tequila, let me look at the girls type of song than they normally would do. They're a little more thoughtful normally in terms of emotions and relationships, but they still rock. So Saturday Night is a really great, solid party song. And they always put one or two on their albums. So that's fine. And this is a really good one. In no way, shape, or form does it make me feel any worse about them. I'm still looking forward to their new album coming out this summer. So check out Saturday Night by one of my guilty pleasure bands, the Black Moods. And finally, not going to talk a lot about this because the album just came out today. So within the next week or two, I will have a full review of the entire album for you. But Aldo Nova, King of Deceit. by my count, the third release off of his. I don't know what this is. He's been working on this rock opera for over a decade, The Life and Times of Eddie Gage. So finally today, on April the 1st, what he's calling a 10-song preview EP. Again, like Dream Widow, you give me 45, 50 minutes of music, I don't look at that as an EP. That's a full-length album. So I don't know what to expect from this in terms of, is this it? Is this what he has distilled the life and times of Eddie Gage down into these 10 songs? As I mentioned, it's 50 minutes plus. So it's a full album length project. But what I've read about this, what I've heard about this, that he's been working on for so long, he's got, dare I say, 100 songs that he's been tweaking, distilling, fine-tuning. You can tell Aldo Nova is a perfectionist. Sometimes that's great, but I've always told you guys I prefer the Dave Grohl type. Just get out there, create, do it, give it to the fans. The fans don't like it, you turn around a year later and you give them something different. This fine-tuning, this tweaking, this twerking. Sorry, I know that's a Miley Cyrus thing. That's not really a music technician, engineer type term. I don't want to see Aldo Nova twerking. But you just wonder, sometimes these creative musicians, these creative types get wrapped up in themselves, wrapped up in their own minds, trying to be the best possible version of themselves they can be. And I'm not saying it's wrong. Look at acting. A great example to me would be Daniel Day-Lewis, where Daniel Day-Lewis will spend years researching a role, living that role, being that role in real life. For a guy who's been around as long as he has and won as many accolades and awards as he has, look at his biography. Look at how many films he's actually been in, given his age. One every 2 to 3 years. Whereas you look at somebody, and I'm not trying to disparage him, I know he's got health issues and just retired, but you look at somebody like Bruce Willis or a Nicolas Cage, who are doing straight to DVD projects every 2 months just to pay the bills and keep the tax man off their butt. Somewhere in the middle would be nice. Somewhere in the middle would be nice. So Aldo Nova has slaved over this project for so long, and I cannot wait to start diving into it. Again, like I said, he's already released 3 tracks. I think the 4th just came out today, The Bitch in Black. But of course, the entire album came out today as well. So King of Deceit, it's hard to judge this as a standalone song because it feels like it is part of a bigger project. I've told you guys I'm not a big fan of Pink Floyd, but it feels like if you cut a song out of the wall, one of the more minor songs out of the wall, and tried to just say, here, There you go. Here's a single. Play it on the radio. It wouldn't work. King of Deceit's better, of course, than anything Pink Floyd would do in this respect, but King of Deceit is not a radio-friendly, radio-ready single. It's not something going to put on a Spotify playlist, but I can see where it could fit into a bigger picture in terms of a thematic concept album, which supposedly is what the life and times of Eddie Gage is. So I will say it's intriguing. As an Aldo Nova fan, I still like it. I don't think the casual fan will like it at all, but open your mind, get on Spotify now that the entire album is out, listen to the whole thing with the King of Deceit in context, and then see what you think. Drop me a line. Let me know what you think. Check out our Facebook page. Put a comment out there. So that'll do it for Breakdown. Segment 3 is coming up. I want to go back, of course, our look at all the rock and roll anniversaries, birthdays, moments in rock history. Hang out for a little bit longer, kids. I'm the Maestro. We'll be right back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Wanna Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Welcome back. Segment 3 of the Fortress of Rock. With me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. April the 1st, 2022. As always, glad to have you aboard. I want to go back. Segment 3, in tribute to Eddie Money, the late great Eddie Money. Our anniversaries of classic album releases, births, deaths, moments in rock and roll history. And this is, of course, where we have to give credit to our sources, ultimateclassicrock.com, the Van Halen News Desk, thisdayinmusic.com. Some of the ideas come from them, but the opinions are mine and mine alone. Going back a little bit earlier in the week, try to stay on the date, try to stay on point, but every once in a while I will stray. So going back here a few days to March the 26th of this previous week, back in 1980 on March the 26th, the great, phenomenal, unbelievable classic third album from Van Halen, Women and Children First, was released. I'm not going to bore you with my Van Halen fandom, how much I love them, how much I love this album. I could do an entire podcast just about Van Halen, but there are so many other ones out there. I prefer to be more inclusive and give myself a little bit more content to work with. But some of the things that I love about Women and Children First, things that other people might not bring up talking about this album. Number one, Fools. is one of the most underrated Van Halen songs in their catalog. Fools is such a down and dirty, nasty, fantastic, unpolished to me. Listening to that song, it is just let these guys go into the studio and tear this thing up on one take type of song. Fools is the one song as I was growing up that reached out to me. That, yes, everybody loved And the Cradle Will Rock, Take Your Whiskey Home. How could you not love Take Your Whiskey Home? In a simple rhyme over the years it keeps getting better and better and better. But for some reason, Fools was always the one song on Women and Children First that always spoke to me. And maybe that's because who I am. I'm cynical. I don't like people. And the sheer and utter disdain that David Lee Roth and Van Halen on this song have for people. I live with fools. How can you say it better than that? Maybe we should have looked at Fools as somewhat of a precursor to the dark, phenomenal follow-up album to this, Fair Warning, which of course I've said on The Fortress in the past. I think that's the greatest Van Halen album of all time because it's dark, it's moody, it's reckless, it's raunchy, it explores dark corners of our society, pornography, domestic abuse. The other thing I want to bring up on Women and Children First, no, I'm not going to talk about this album forever, though I could. Van Halen is very underrated, in my opinion, in terms of the album art, the photography on their albums. Sometimes very subtle, but the front and back cover shots of the band on Women and Children First, the black and white shots they used, are two of the greatest band photos. I don't care who you're talking about. Stones, Beatles, Zeppelin. The front and the back covers of Women and Children First, those two shots of Van Halen are, to me, the greatest rock and roll photography moments, arguably, in history. Yes, I will say even better than the cover of Van Halen 1. But look at the covers of all the Van Halen albums. There's something there deeper. Even if you want to look at the last album with David Lee Roth, A Different Kind of Truth. If you look at that and you don't see the phallic symbol involved in that cover, you're crazy. Of course, some of the albums are just logos, different variations on the VH logo, whether it be the classic cover of VH2 or For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge with the red leather background, or the strong man holding up the globe with the VH version 2.0 logo. Van Halen never got enough credit for their fantastic album covers, and Women and Children First is no exception. One other Van Halen note before I move on to other acts and singers. This is the day, of course, April the 1st in 1985, the urban legend that this is the day when David Lee Roth quit Van Halen, which is not true. Happened much later on in 1985. But there were rumors speculating about David Lee Roth quit on this day in 85 and took a bunch of people with him from the Van Halen staff, security people specifically. The timeline just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. But it's still fun to talk about. Tragically, on this day, Marvin Gaye, the great soul singer, shot by his father. One of the most dark and disturbing moments in music history. Marvin Gaye was just reaching the pinnacle of what he was supposed to be, of what he could have been. And a domestic dispute, of course, between his father and mother, he got involved, and his father unfortunately shot him. It turned out later that his father had a brain tumor. Take that for what you will. I personally can never see how anybody could shoot a son, a daughter, or vice versa. Who knows what Marvin Gaye could have done with all the extra years he would have had if he hadn't intervened. Who knows? Maybe he saved his mother's life. But yet, unfortunately, April the 1st is the anniversary of Marvin Gaye being gunned down by his father. On a personal note, sad and tragic. April the 1st, 2015, Cynthia Lennon died. Of course, Cynthia Lennon was John Lennon's first wife back when he was with the Beatles. And everybody tried to cover it up. Nobody wanted all the young girl fans, all the young female fans to know that John Lennon had actually gotten married and that he was off the market, because that could damage the image of the Beatles. God forbid. But the worst part of it all, and I don't know if Cynthia Lennon was a good person, a great person, not a great person, but good Lord, you gotta believe she's better than Yoko Ono. And I know there's Beatles fanatics out there who are cursing me out right now for saying that, but I have not seen one thing in hours and hours and hours and hours of footage and interviews, articles I've read, to tell me that Yoko Ono is anything special. Now, am I judging who falls in love with who and why? No, I'm not. But given everything we've seen, especially looking at some of the stuff from this recent Peter Jackson documentary about the Beatles, there's a reason why it's a joke in society now when a woman breaks up a friendship, let alone a band, but a friendship, she's called a Yoko Ono. Do you notice how nobody ever said this kind of stuff about Linda McCartney? And nobody ever said Linda McCartney was talented. There's a lot of stuff out there where they have taken her vocals in Wings and pulled them out, and you can hear she's not a great singer. But the inherent difference is Yoko Ono, whether it was her or John pushing her, inserted herself into the Beatles and destroyed the dynamic and destroyed the band. And again, I go back to Cynthia Lennon. What did she do to deserve this? What did she do to deserve this other than falling for one of the Beatles early on? And finds out that John is cheating on her with Yoko frickin' Ono. Please, somebody explain to me what about Yoko Ono. I'm not talking physical attraction. Again, plenty of other ways to fall in love with someone emotionally, intellectually. Give me one of those. But I have not seen one damn thing to explain to me why Yoko Ono had that kind of siren hold on John Lennon. I heard Jet on the radio this morning in my car, and I was thinking just about this particular topic and how I was going to talk about it today on the Fortress. And you can see it again going back to the Disney Get Back long documentary by Peter Jackson, how Paul McCartney was trying to basically take over the Beatles. But I never saw it as anything other than he wanted to be more creative. He wanted to be the dynamic force behind the Beatles, where again, John is so wrapped up in Yoko and forcing Yoko in on everybody else that Paul could see the writing on the wall. And that's why Paul, when I heard Jet, I'm thinking about how great he was after he left the Beatles, how fantastic the music he put out was from 1970 all the way through the early 80s. Been a little bit more sporadic later on in life, but still, he's trying. He's still putting out great stuff. And we're not going to talk about the tragic death of John Lennon. That's got nothing to do with the discussion of creativity. I just don't see how Yoko Ono made John Lennon a better person, a more creative person. But that's just me. Do you guys remember Stacy's Mom? Song that was all over the airwaves back when songs were on the airwaves outside of 30-year-old Fleetwood Mac and John Cougar Mellencamp songs. Adam Schlesinger was one of the founding members of Fountains of Wayne, who, of course, performed that song. He died on this day just a few years ago, April the 1st, 2020. Complications from COVID-19. A birthday tied into a death that I want to bring up here to wrap up. I want to go back. I talked earlier about guilty pleasure bands. Now, this is a popular band. This is a band that actually sold a ton of records, but I still look at them almost as a guilty pleasure. It's not one of those bands that I admit to liking a lot. But Toto, of course, now out on the road with Journey. I always liked Toto. I never went out and searched out their albums, bought their albums, but then again, I never heard them do a song that offended me in terms of it being stupid or not creative. Toto always kind of knew what they were doing. They had strong songwriting. Of course, they were all session players. So they were all adept at their particular instruments. Their drummer, Jeff Porcaro, was born on April the 1st, 1954, unfortunately. And this is a really bizarre story in terms of an end to a life. He died in 1992. I don't know if they ever found definitive proof of it, but he was spraying his lawn. Pesticide, insecticide, I don't know what it was, weed killer, but he was working on his lawn, spraying chemicals on his lawn, and then fell ill and died. Now, I've never gotten to see Toto. I really kind of wanted to see this whole Toto Journey double bill that's touring here spring and summer. Unfortunately, can't pull it off. But Toto had so many great songs. Africa has held up through the test of time. People to this day still love the song Africa. And why not? It is a great, great song. Toto's songs have not aged badly at all. Rosanna, Hold the Line, people still love. I know my daughter loves, 20 years old, loves Hold the Line, which came out in the 70s. The first big hit for Toto. So bittersweet, remembering the birthday of Jeff Porcaro, who passed away in 1992. All right, just got a couple minutes left. Time to wrap it up in segment 4 and tell you what we're going to talk about over the next couple weeks here on the Fortress. So stay tuned. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, CastBox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, kids. Hoping you have a great, fantastic weekend. Final Four in basketball, if you're into sports. WrestleMania, if you're into that sort of thing. Time to wrap it up here on the Fortress of Rock here with the Maestro, Kevin Crane, April the 1st, 2022. Looking forward to the next few weeks. I think I mentioned ZZ Top has a new live album coming out called Raw. Kind of ties back into the whole wrestling deal, right? And I mentioned they have a song they've released called Brown Sugar. It is not a remake of the Rolling Stones' Brown Sugar. So we will look into that, give you a review of that here over the next couple weeks. But I did want to correct myself and say it is not a cover based on the Rolling Stones' Brown Sugar. Of course, we mentioned Skid Row's got a new lead singer, so their new album coming out, The Gang's All Here, the title track, next week. We will review that for you here on The Fortress. 2 albums coming up over the next few weeks. Red Hot Chili Peppers' new one, Unlimited Love, just came out today. I want to make a complaint, a consumer complaint here on the Fortress of Rock. It might get resolved, but at this point in time, I am extremely unhappy with whoever is running digital for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I got an email this morning originating from Live Nation, and we all know how respectable they are and how competent they are, telling me that I could, for $5, and it's not a scam. I checked the email. I have signed up for Live Nation emails. I signed up for Red Hot Chili Peppers emails, so it wasn't a scam. I get an email from Live Nation saying for 1 week I could get a download, a digital download of the new album Unlimited Love for $5. I said, hey, sounds good. I've got a CD burner. Drop it into Windows Media Player and burn a copy. I'm good with that. So I went ahead and put my credit card in and went through and bought it. And they said, hey, thank you very much. One problem. You never told me or gave me a link or any kind of download option to get my digital album. You morons. I can't download the album if you don't tell me how to, or give me a link, or give me a zip file. So I have complained. And again, it's not a scam. This goes through Warner Brothers Music because that's who I had to contact through the email that said, hey, thank you for ordering the new Red Hot Chili Peppers album. If you have any issues, contact Warner Brothers Music. It's not a scam. It's just incompetence. So be forewarned. I'm telling you, kids, do not, if you are signed up for anything with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, fall for this, because as of right now, about 6 hours after I paid, I have not got any access to the Red Hot Chili Peppers new album. In the end, I'm an idiot. I should just listen to it on Spotify. It's the best way to do it, right? Put up with a couple ads. Otherwise, it's free. So what did I do today? I also bought the download of Aldo Nova's The Life and Times of Eddie Gage. That one's gone a little bit better. Still not a fan of Amazon Music. God forbid you put that on your computer. It takes forever to open up. I know everybody out there is going, well, what about your phone? I don't use my phone for music. I know. I'm one of the few fossils out there who does not use their phone for their music. I still have a CD player in my car. I prefer to put CDs in and listen to them that way. I want to be able to drive my car without having to worry about shuffling through my iPod as it sits in its little harness in my cup holder. I find it unwieldy and I find it stupid. I long for the old days. Yes, those old days when you had a cassette player in your car and you'd put a cassette in and you'd hear it start to garble and whine, and you'd see the tape spitting out of your cassette player, and then you'd have to stop and spend 10 minutes with a pencil. Yes, you had to have a pencil in your car because you took a pencil and rewound the spool and brought the tape back into the case so you could play it all again, and it was all good. That being said, Aldo Nova, Red Hot Chili Peppers coming up over the next couple weeks. We're about 3 weeks out from my review of Bon Jovi live at the Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. The next concert review we will have for you here on The Fortress. Good stuff coming, kids. No reason not to check out our podcast every Friday night. Get you ready for the weekend with your music choices, what to listen to and what to stay away from. That being said, time to wrap it up for good for this week. Have a great weekend. Hopefully the weather is great where you are. Woke up to snow this morning on April the 1st where I live. Happens every year. Still can't get used to it. Still wonder why I put up with it. Anybody down in Florida, Texas, Georgia, Alabama who needs a radio host, a podcast host, let me know. I'll be more than happy to move on down. Rock out. Roll on, kids. I'm the Maestro. We'll check you out next week.